All right, this is going to be the third STC captain interview. Today I have the captains of the Happy Friends. We got, what do you prefer, Poke or Desksmash? What do you prefer?
We can go desksmash. That's my official VGC name, so we can go with that.
Desksmash, and we got Vini to Winnie.
What's up, guys?
All right, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
No.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
What do you want to know about me?
So no introduction?
I'll ramble for a little bit. No, I'm Vinny the Winnie. I'm mostly known for being a singles player who's like pretty out around there in the community, but VGC wise, I was on the team with both of these two in the call in season 2, and I was the most expensive player, and we won. Accomplishments wise, like my only thing I've actually done is win WPF in Swish, and now I'm washed at Swish, but pretty good on. I think I'm pretty good at the managing side of things, the tour side of things.
All right.
All right, I'll go for a more serious introduction then. I started playing VGC in 2023, so it's been about 2 years since I started playing. The 2023 season was my first. I didn't really get into draft until the second season of STC. I actually didn't know that it was a draft league until after I got bid on and the draft started. So I was basically learning everything as I went. I ended up being the black and white main, #free black white. And it was a lot of fun. So I always like to play every year when this comes around, even though I'm not a huge draft guy, because it's a fun social experience, not experiment. I guess it is an experiment as well, but it's a lot of fun. And this time around, I'll be taking the helm, and we'll see what happens.
I think that, at least I know, especially a lot of guys who play in like smoke on tours. I don't know if you play in smoke on tours. I know you're a big IRL event guy kind of guy. A lot of them really don't prefer solo tours, especially for draft. Team tours are very different in that sense, and a lot of them prefer the team tours to the solo tours. So I can completely get why you don't like solo tours. Not everybody's too big on them.
I'm not necessarily against them. It's just that for draft specifically, I'm not a huge builder when it comes to draft. I like to play like very standard. So having the additional input into the builds is definitely something that I enjoy. Like sort of like an actual team building process is a lot more enjoyable as opposed to like I just roll up to something standard and then my opponent has like a jetpack into like some other bullshit that I haven't seen before, and it's like, all right, cool.
Sunny day Iron Moth jetpack. Like what are we doing?
I'm more of a like for VGC at least. I prefer leagues to any kind of tours. But yeah,
all right.
Citrus is always fun, so got that. And that's why we have good synergy. Like we got the pilot and we got the puppet master.
What the fuck?
That's me.
All right, we're gonna go on to what is your guys' captaining experience? I know Vinny has some captaining experience. Do you have any Desksmash?
So in VGC specifically, or Pokemon specifically, no. But in pretty much every game that I've played prior, I've had some sort of leadership experience. I played semi-professional Counter-Strike for 8 years. I played.
Really?
I was the in-game leader role for like most of that. I also played a rhythm game called Osu. You might have heard of that. I also captained plenty of I captained plenty of tournaments in that game as well. Won a couple of those. So overall, a good amount of leadership experience, but not in VGC specifically. So this is technically my first go around, but I have a general idea of what needs to be done. I know how to manage players, that type of thing. So.
Well, you learned something new. I didn't know there were Osu tours, and I didn't know you did CS:GO either. That's cool as fuck.
Never
learn something new every day.
Yeah, but for me, the main ones is I've won PWS season 4, I believe, with my team, the Pheasant Skibbity Toilets. I was basically a solo captain because my co-captain did nothing. And there was VGC in that tour, and our VGC had they started out 0-6, I believe, pre-mids, and then they turned it around, and the two main ones didn't drop a single game post-mids. So we had that. And then other than that, I captained PGP a bunch, which is like a league tour, and then I've also done some like lesser tours, but for the most part, most tours I end up solo. I've only really solo captained because my co-captains, when I do captain with anyone, do nothing.
But it sounds like you have a bad taste in co-captains. It's a good thing I recommended
I think I picked a good one this time. At least if this co-captain doesn't carry the team, I know he will win games.
Yeah, that's true. Your other co-captains have never won games before.
Well, yeah, they didn't play games normally.
I got a screenshot for you, Desksmash, that you're gonna love. You might spam this shit in your server. I'm sorry in the future, Vinny. If he does end up spamming this, it's really funny. I'll send it to you.
Does it involve me?
No. Do you know who Ojama is? Do you know the Smogon player Ojama?
Not really.
Have you ever seen the "You Are Bench" screenshot? Have you ever seen that?
I've definitely seen the bench stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I'm gonna give that to him.
Well, I think I'm relegating myself to that position anyway, so I don't. No, I've learned from captaining PWS that it's a lot to manage your own games while also managing a team, and I also just don't think I'm worth 20k in this pool because the pool is already quite strong in my opinion.
Oh, interesting! You're not self-buying.
That's the plan right now.
There was I'll give a bit of spoiler to a different interview. The captains had asked me what I think of some of the other cap cores, and they listed yours, and I said that I think your team was a wildcard team. It mostly depended if you had self-bought and what your record would be. Because I said I think if you go all negative, I think you might struggle to make playoffs. But if you have like a middling season, you should be fine.
I think that's a fair assessment, but yeah, I mean, I think it serves better because especially with believe the buy-in is now 25k. I don't know if it's 20 or 25, but I think that can be used towards getting another player that I can support to go positive for sure and fill that otherwise what I'd be playing.
Mm-hmm. So. All right. You kind of answered some of this already, but what are your guys' expectations going into this tour?
It depends on if Vinny picks a good team. If I like the team, then we'll win. Then otherwise, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I mean, personally, definitely, I think the captain pool is pretty strong already. So I think it's going to be quite competitive, and that's really the main expectation. Like, I do definitely want to make playoffs, and I think we should make playoffs in this pool. I think, as far as like playing and team wise goes, especially if we have that extra budget, I think we'll match up really well. I'm not going to say expect to win, but I'd like to win because then if I don't draft anyone who's been like the only people who, like, for example, Trace and Yahoodles, who are the only people like otherwise besides I think you and Log that have won every season that they participated in, then I can be the only one left because I have only played once and won once. So
no. That is not correct. So the Trace has won every season he's played in. Yahoodles has made finals every season he's in.
Okay.
And then Soul Survivor is the other one who's made finals every season he's played in.
But you haven't won every season?
I did not win season 1, no. I only
so season 1, if season 1 counts, okay. But then
if we're counting season 1, which was very Mickey.
Yeah, isn't there technically some like niche people from like our team, for example, like Lego Nene, who technically has won every season? As well?
Aragon has never come back since he's won every season.
But yeah, as far as the people who've come twice, it'd be funny to be the only like 2-time person left. But yeah,
well, me and Trace are 2 times.
If I don't, I'm saying like the only 2 times I don't have lost. If I don't take Trace, which.
I'll actually throw you guys a spitball question. I'm going to put another new question here in between. What captain cores are you most worried about going in? Who do you think are your threats? Who are you not worried about?
Should I talk some trash?
You could talk trash. I mean, the other captains might see this, so just keep in mind. Don't talk too crazy now.
I mean, I won't let myself live it down if we lose to that boys team. Let's just no. I don't see them as a threat though, which is why I'm saying that. I think really when it comes down to it, the main threats to me are always going to be you, Hopeless, and Robin, because I think that prep-wise, you guys are just the hardest to beat and the hardest to match. And I think in a tour like this, that's ultimately what the captains like matter the most. Obviously, you guys are all very good players, and you have good co-captains as well. But it's really that prep X factor that I think brings it over the edge.
I think a lot of it comes down to like who the captains actually manage to assemble for their roster, because at the end of the day, like even if the captains are really good players, if they don't build a good team around them, then it really doesn't matter. Even if you have like the best player in the league, they can only win one of your 4 wins that you need to actually win as a team. So I think the roster construction aspect is going to play a big role. Like obviously you can say that like Plant and Tio look really, really good on paper, but if they aren't able to build like a good roster around them, then you can't necessarily say that they're going to be like really, really scary to play against. Obviously, individually, they're both really strong, but I think it's hard to make any definitive conclusions without actually seeing the rosters first. But putting that aside, like everyone can put together a good roster and can play. It's just a matter of what that's going to look like. It's hard to say for now.
That's very true. Season
that's
2,
why
Deathboy was a finalist, and he was first seed. Even if Vinny here doesn't think he's a threat, he was first seed and finalist of Season 2. His team did do very bad Season 3 for Red Dwarf, though.
What I was going to say is, like, that's why I said Hopeless and Robin, because I think as far as, like, no matter who they end up with, as long as they end up with, like, a somewhat competitive roster, I think Hopeless and Robin are the people who can elevate those players to compete.
Ooh, I don't know.
Like,
Robin was last season. I don't know about that one. He was last season.
I didn't think Hopeless's roster was that good last season, and Hopeless managed to make it into a chip-winning team. And then, I think...
I helped.
He did help. He did help. I did mention that in the other interview that he did help a lot.
I think that, for example, this Sven and Justin Tank were, like, I'm curious how much they know about, like, actually draft, and, like, I think Sven knows draft. I'm curious, like, how much they know about, like, the players and drafting a good team.
Justin Tank has played draft before. He has played multiple seasons at SCDA, actually. He has played draft.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yep.
Good to know.
Justin Tang I think Justin Tang actually started in draft, if I'm correct. He can correct me on that if I'm incorrect.
That's crazy. I did not know that. That's cool. But yeah, I think cores like that, and then obviously, like, Plant Tio. I think Plant can support, but I think that, like, those cores think are less consistent in terms of, like, supporting, but...
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good answers. All right. Next up, we are going to say, what are your thoughts on the current formats? We have 3 SV, 2 Swish, and 2 Usum. We do not have a X Factor format this season, so no Black White, no Nat Dex, no Oras, no none of that.
My opinion is I started playing in 2023, so I really haven't touched any of the old formats. So I think they're garbage because I don't want to learn them. Bring back Black and White.
Yeah, I mean, on a meme level, Natex would be funny because that's the format I've historically done the best in. But again, I'm not really playing, so I do think that format is a Mickey format. So it was a good one to, like, get rid of. I think the formats that we got here are a good selection, and I think hopefully they should be a lot of times the best players that are succeeding in these formats, and they'll be the most competitive, which I do like. And I think it's cool, at least for a VGC tour, to me, to not have, like, a bajillion formats, because so many of these tours, just there's so many formats, and it's really hard to cover them all. So I think that should make it a lot easier. The captain.
Do you guys prefer SV with Terra Preview or without Terra Preview? We here are playing with Terra Preview, so you will be able to see the 6 Terra types on both teams at the start of the game. Do you guys prefer the CTS or the OTS of Terra?
I personally consider them to be like 2 different formats. And the reason I say that is because I think whether or not you can know the Terra types beforehand can definitely play like a really big part into the team building process itself. A great example of this is last season I had an SV team that consisted of Goldango and Reggie Drago, and basically what I would do is if I was able to see in the open team sheet or the open Terra preview that like 4 out of the 6 slots on my opponent's team is Terra Fairy, I know I could just lead Reggie Drago and then immediately switch to Goldango and they burn their Terra Fairy and then I just win instantly. Whereas like if I don't know what their Terra types are going to be, I have to be wary of that. And then they also have to be wary of that as well. And I feel like that really affects the team building process because if I know for a fact that my opponent, another example, don't have too much draft experience, but I remember I played a season of WPF where my opponent had an Annihilate. And I specifically, that was not open Terra. And right, I made my Goldango Terra normal. And so I basically walled the Annihilate, and I got the turn right where he Rage Fisted the turn I clicked Terra normal. And again, I think both are fine. I think both of them play differently in terms of playing and in terms of team building. So I don't have a particular preference, but I do think it's interesting that like that one small change I think affects a lot of the team building and playing side of things.
I'm going to say Terra Preview personally. I think when it comes down to like a best of 3 set and you're doing non-Terra Preview, I feel like one like not because it cheats or gimmick, but like one Terra tech that is like the opponent's not expecting, it can like shift the whole tide of a series in a game, and I think that's a lot. Whereas like Terra Preview in itself is its own little like mind game and meta game. where you're showing Terra types to scare your opponents away from doing things. Like one of the best examples to me is like you have Fake Out, which again you can still cover that with a Covert Cloak, but like say your opponent can't run that, and you just tech your Terra Ghost, and it makes the game very interesting, and also you have a lot more of trying to bait people into using Terra types. Regardless, you do have to prep for Terra types and come to the game prepared, so I think that's always what's going to matter more, but I think knowing the Terra types in game, to me, is just creates, like, it gets rid of so many unnecessary possibilities.
I personally, I always prefer Terra Preview to CTS. Mm-hmm. When I played in DCL and CTS, I've experienced both the losing and winning side of it. I have won multiple games in CTS where I hard called out their Terra immediately, and I had just won. Example is when I Terra Blasted I was at +2 with Iron Hands. I Terra Blasted a Terra Ghost Ursa Luna, didn't know it was Terra Ghost, and I just Terra Blast Ghosted it raw, and I won the game off of that. It's just stuff like that could just win you the game, and I don't think it's very competitive. Me personally, I prefer Terra Preview because it lets you have a bit more counterplay, especially in the preview and builder aspect as to which six you pick.
No, I agree, because I think it's like at worst a lot of the time Terra Preview with that is it can turn it into like at least a 50-50, which I think is a lot better than trying to consider the possibilities of so many types, especially when VGC timer is low and you have to plan for all this stuff. Like a lot of times one of those Terras will just work and it'll catch you off guard and you're down a game. And I think it's harsh.
All right, we're going to go on to the next question here. All right, so STC we're going to be considering a best of 8 format. For reference, the best of 8 would be in rotating slot of 4 SV, 3 Usum, 3 Swish. It's going to go SV, Swish, Usum, and you're going to end up playing an extra SV game at the end of the season, which is fine because SV is the current gen.
You're saying that for playoffs?
I am saying this for regular season, where you would be a best of 8 if we have enough player apps. Do you guys prefer a best of 7 or a best of 8? Have you played in best of 8 formats? No previous ST seasons have been best of 7. Being best of 8 would be a bit more experimental.
I wasn't expecting that question. I mean, like, I think I probably have more of like knowledge or commentary on this because I've seen it implemented in singles tours with DCL and DPL. Ties add a lot of layers that I find can be annoying, but also they can keep a lot of teams in a season. Because I've been on 2 teams, both times where our seasons, like if ties weren't a thing, our seasons would probably have been over pre-mids, but ties kept us in and got us to positions where we were able to make, well, at least one of them was able to make playoffs. I think as far as that goes, I like ties, but I think VGC as a format already covers well enough that like the factor of like one-off games, because it is a best of 3 every series. So I think most of the times you're gonna get a fine result in a series. So I don't like, in terms of fairness or having the correct team winning a series, I think that the current format is, I prefer that.
The best of 7?
Yeah, it's also just one less game. It's like it's 8 mocks a week versus 7. Well, technically, 24 mocks a week versus 16? We're counting full series.
I could talk forever about tournament formats. I have a lot of opinions about tournament formats after playing in a bunch of tournaments across a lot of different games. In my personal opinion, like anything where a tie or a tiebreaker can come into play is just objectively bad. And the reason I say that is it just creates a lot of contingencies that are hard to track from both a competitor and from a spectator standpoint. Especially like in tournaments that do round robin in any game, really, where it's like, here's the snapshot. This team can win. If this team wins and this other team loses and this other team loses, then they can make the playoffs. It's like no one wants to have to keep track of any of that bullshit. It should the point of a tournament is to find out who the best teams are and then just have them play against each other so we can have the champion. Like any of this other tiebreaker stuff, it really only applies to like middle of the pack or bottom teams. Like I really don't care. It just is a headache for everyone. And that'll still be my opinion, even if I'm like last place in the league. I just think it's messy, it's unnecessary, and it just makes things more complicated for everyone.
Interesting. That's the first time I've heard
my math was wrong.
It was best of 8. That's interesting. As for my personal opinion, I like best of 8 actually. I think best of 8, at least in terms of draft context, keeps the standings and keeps the season a lot closer and keeps it a lot more competitive. It makes the playoff race a lot closer, especially when you can tie. So makes you have to think as a captain about your slots and how you are drafting as your players. I'll use my own teams as an example. My team from STC Season 2 would team stomp everybody. If they were best of 8, it would not matter. That team was so strong where it would just team stomp everybody. We had 5-6 consistent wins per week, right? My Season 3 team would actually suffer in best of 8. My team was not as strong. My top player, being Trace, was not performing, and my team would definitely have suffered in a best of 8. There are weeks where we have lost, we maybe could have tied, and there are weeks we won where we could have tied, where we were pretty much going like 4-3, right? So in that
and
context,
you guys were towards the bottom of playoffs, right?
Yes, we were the last.
Yeah. So you potentially could have not been in play, even though you ended up being the strongest team in playoffs. You could have missed playoffs just because of that. But.
Yes,
I guess specifically in the context of like best of 7 versus best of 8, I do like formats that allow for more matches in general because it rewards good scouting and good team building. So like if you have a team that has more strong players in terms of team depth, I definitely think that should be rewarded as opposed to like USPL right now is having best of 5 playoffs on rosters of like 12 people, which is just bullshit.
Right.
But I definitely agree. Like more players playing to reward team depth is definitely good. I'm just speaking like specifically in the context of allowing ties and tiebreakers to happen. It's just something in general I'm not a fan of. But in terms of like best of 8 versus best of 7, I definitely am a bit more lenient in that aspect because I think you should reward like building a stronger and more deep team.
Yeah, because 4-3 versus 5-3 is actually a huge difference. It's massive.
I agree 100% that the best of 8 rewards more depth in your roster. It also gives your min bids more room to pop off. Something some teams struggle with is to play older players, and just having 8 slots means you can play more people. It's always a good thing. I guess if your team is bad, it's a bad thing. But you always want to assume that you're going to draft the best team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if apps keep up this way, the pool like it definitely would be fine enough to do best of 8.
I'd rather do best of 9, but I don't think we'd get the players for that.
Best of 9 is something very experimental. No draft tour has done that yet. Yeah, no, for sure. Last time I checked, we were at 85 apps, and it was only like 26 hours since app it has dropped, so it's pretty good. For STC standards,
that's very good.
All right. Let's go on to the next question. That was a really good answer. I was not expecting those ones. All right. What are your values as managers? What do you value out of players?
All right, I'm gonna get this one out of the way, and this one is some people might not like this. I hate players that are always like down talking themselves like, oh, I'm so bad. Oh man, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so bad. Wah. No one wants to hear that shit. Like, yeah, we get it. You didn't play good. Like, just own it. Say, sorry, guys, my bad. Ask for feedback if you want it, and let's just move on. Don't like beat up on yourself, any of that. I just want people who are or who are willing to accept feedback and are just easy to work with. And that's really all I care about.
I'll say I echo a lot of those sentiments. For me personally, I want people who are going to have good attitudes is probably the biggest one for me. I don't want someone blaming. Sure, hacks can happen in games, but if you take that attitude, I don't think you're going to be able to consistently win, because you can, even in games like that, you can look for something you've done wrong and something you can do better. And I like people like that can move forward and just continue putting in work and not let things get them down even if they have a bad start. I think that's important. Also, just generally looking for people who are going to be committed to the team. You don't need to be crazy actor or anything, but you're going to build your team, do mocks, help some other people on the team, and be willing to. The feedback point is also a huge one. You need to respect your other teammates and captains and know when to take feedback, when potentially you can argue against it and do so respectfully.
From what I'm hearing from you, Vinny, Alice Sabrina is the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, I mean, not to say anything, but he, as far as attitude-wise and being a teammate goes, that is a lot of what I'm drawing experience off of.
I have wanted Alice Sabrina in every tour I am in, and it just never worked out.
Well, can we stop? Can we stop raising his price already?
Oh my god, that guy's good. What do you mean raise his price? He literally went positive in the last 4 BTC tours he played in.
That's anyway. But yeah, that's
price is already expensive.
That. As far as attitude goes, yes, Alice is essentially the perfect person that I'm looking for on that front.
Yo, shout out.
I think another thing as well is being a a manager type or like a captain, etc., is knowing the types of players you have and knowing how much you actually need to work with each one. Like, for example, like if you have someone like Tio on your team, obviously in this case he's a captain, so it doesn't really apply. But if you have like a player like that on your team where like his skill level and team building level is a known quantity and you know that he's good and he's going to show up and just win, like if he wants to just show up with something and just play, like I'll let him do that because he is good enough and I trust that. Whereas like you can dedicate more of your resources to like maybe some of the lower priced players who maybe don't have the confidence or the experience, and you can work with them one-on-one and divert more of your resources there. I think knowing what kind of players you have and what you need, how to best use them, I think is really important.
I agree. I think you do need, like in every roster, I think you need some of those players who are self-sufficient that can like run their own format, build their own teams, and all you really have to do for them each week is just give them some good mocks and like maybe small tips. But I think it is very important for a balance of a roster that like you're not having to have just the people at the top running around to every player and managing their teams and building them. You need other people on the roster who can do that for themselves, but then also maybe help someone else. And it helps create good balance in a team.
I agree with that. I think vibes is very important. And I think I don't really like when people get down on themselves because I think it drags down the team's environment overall and it drags down their own vibes. Especially if someone is beating up on themselves. I think sometimes someone can beat up on themselves. I know I'm pretty big on that kind of thing where if I lose and I think I should have won, I will get very upset. I've gotten better on just taking a break and just getting offline at that point in time. But I know I am definitely the type of person where if I lose and I think I should have won or I think I had to win, I will beat up on myself for it.
I can attest to that. I actually thought about some other things about like things that I didn't like when I was. This is more from like singles tours, but like there are specific people I've teamed with that they see matchup and they just give up on matchup. I absolutely despise that. Mm-hmm. Like even if it's a bad matchup, you should always try and find some way to win, even if it's gimmicky or cheesy. I absolutely hated teaming with people like that. I also just don't like. I mean, there's like the no effort people. I've teamed with quite a few of them, and like. I don't like when people do that, and then like I have had a few of them where they go and talk down on teammates, and then I've had captains that like only value wins at the end of the day, where it's like there's so many ways that team environment can be made negative, and I just don't like any of that.
That's an interesting concept because I'm one of those captains where I value wins, right? I don't care how you win. I say this every time. You've been on my team before. I don't care how you win. If you win your game, you win your game. I don't care how you win. Hacks your opponent. DDoS your opponent.
Agree.
Blackmail your opponent. Just win. I don't care how you do it, right? As long as you win, you win. If you hack your opponent, we can go over it if you want to, but if you won, you won. I'm not going to press you on it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, 3 years from now, no one's going to remember that you got that sludge bomb poison. Like, the trophy is still in your room.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm fine with wins like that as long as they're like not the norm. Like, I think I prefer someone who's like again, it is frustrating if you have a player who feel like they put in all the work and then they go and they don't translate it into a win. So it is very much about a balance between the two.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. I've asked the other two captains I've interviewed these questions. Would you prefer a player who is active but is a has a middling slot, means that their slot is like a coin flippy chance to kind of win? They may be more likely to lose than win, but they are very active. They help prep. They prep their own teams. They help teammates mock and all that kind of thing. Or would you rather prefer somebody who is not very active? They kind of focus on their own thing, but they are consistent win slot. I'll use two examples. I'll use Impulse from my team from last season, who had like a milling record. Let's say main season. I think he went 5-2 overall. But let's say his main season record, which was 3-2. So we say that was like a milling record, right? He was very active, helped other slots, but he wasn't the most consistent win slot during main season, right? And then we'll look at like Miniman, who was like 6-2, right? I think he was 6-1. I think he only lost it. Until then, he was 6-1 main season. Only really focused on his own games. Kind of showed up last minute. Had to like rush prep with him, but he won his games.
Okay, when you put the specific example, I know who my pick is, but in the general world, I would say I think at the end of the day, it's probably the self-sufficient player who's going to get wins more at the end of the day. Because I think if I'm drafting someone to be a consistent slot, even if they are an active player, I want them to be someone who's able to win, which I guess Impulse did go positive, and that's a very good thing still while contributing to helping other slots. But I think I'd rather just have that self-sufficient player because that person's not hurting the team environment, but they're on their own, they're able to get the wins. And that means that myself, for example, I could help other people to create that activity and push wins elsewhere.
He could have had a better record. He also could have had a worse record. He had been benched at some point, at certain points during the season. So that also could have just been on me as the captain to holding back his record. Keep in mind.
I think it really depends on like who you have running the ship. Like, for example, if you have a manager that's very hands-on and they like to get involved and make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to and can contribute where they can, I feel like that can sort of fill the void in place of having more self-sufficient players that don't say a lot. And I think that really sort of would be the determining factor. Like, if you have managers who would like to be more involved and sort of do more hand-holding, I think it's better to have more self-sufficient players so you can really dedicate your time to the people who need that help.
Uh-huh.
Nice. I agree. All right, next up, describe your managing style.
Oh, God.
You might have answered some of this already, but just like as an overall.
I sort of like, I'm typically a very sort of like, taking a look at who I have on my roster and then sort of knowing how to use them. So like, I've already sort of hinted at this before, but like if I have an understanding that some of my players are more skilled, they just sort of want to do their own thing, maybe get a mock or two and then show up and play their match and they're going to win more often than not. I'm more than happy to oblige to that as long as they respond to a message every once in a while. And then again, if I have someone who needs to be more involved, I'm willing to put the time and resources into helping them as long as they're willing to accept feedback and criticism. So I think I sort of alluded to this earlier, but it's just about knowing the players you have and then just basically treating them the way that you need to based on their personality and how much help they need, things like that. I like to be very, very dynamic in that respect. Like, I don't think there is like one correct way to manage a team or to work with players because everyone is going to want like different levels of involvement. Like, I know for me personally, when I was a player, it was like, all right, like my match is tomorrow, let's mock. All right, I just need to make a couple tweaks and then I'm good to go. I would show up, I would win, and then we just go next week. Whereas like I know there's some other players on my team that needed a bit more prep, and the managers and that were better with that. So it really just depends on like knowing what players you have and then just, using those resources accordingly.
I would like I'd like to generalize myself. I'm more of a hands-on manager for sure, but it does vary with player to player. But no matter who the player is, like I always want to see their build. I'll mock them and I'll give them any like pointers. So I have like the baseline, but certain players I will be more hands-on. And like even for example in drafting, I like to give a lot of input. I do like to give my players like some control as well, but I'll be like a final veto if I think anything is bad, even though for example I wouldn't be playing this season. In terms of prep, I like to I'm very much a mock and give feedback kind of manager to everyone. I don't like trying to overstep about the way that anyone plays their build or their game unless I think something is like completely off. But I can vary it. For example, like this is again touching on Alice, but Alice every week I would VC with Alice and build with Alice and do all that in call because that helps them a lot. And I'm willing to like do that for players, and it varies. And then you have other players that I'm taking to in that same tour. They were playing singles, but I would just ping them, make sure they have builds, and then give them a mock. And I knew that they would be able to be mostly self-sufficient.
Good. I'm going to ask a question. Since you said you veto your drafts, so I have a question. Let's say I'm on your team. I want a draft. You have me slotting SV, right? SVVDC draft. I want a team that consists of, let's say my first round was Raging Bolt, right? So the next round, I want Ursaluna into Cresselia into Smeargle. Would you let me have that? I want it.
Honestly,
I think it's good.
Besides the Smeargle, I don't have that many complaints. But it's not necessarily that I'm saying like I'm hard vetoing someone having a draft. I'm willing to like give people teams and like draft stuff that they like, but I'm definitely still want to maintain like draft quality. So if I think like a pick is just not good or like a direction just isn't good, I will be like, I don't think you should do that. I'm gonna I'll direct them elsewhere. Like it's not like it's a hard veto, but I try and be like, I don't think this is good. You should go another direction.
Even if your player is more experienced in the tier than you, though.
Then, I mean, I do, I like to I haven't had that experience, I think, where I've had people that, I mean, I think in this tour, I definitely will have that coming in that experience where I will probably have people that do have, more of an idea of what's good and things like that. So I think I would, relate to their opinion. As long as other people generally agree with them, I think that'd be fine.
Well, I can use the best example here. Let's go to STC Season 2, right? the Celesteela draft that you were using, I had told you that Coco was a bad pick and the Spectre was better, but you were pretty stubborn about it. I let you have the Coco, and then when it came to mids, we agreed Spectre was better, and then the team performed infinitely better with Spectre over Coco. Right?
Yeah, I learned the hard way.
You learned the hard way that I was correct,
I honestly don't even remember if I was that stubborn, but if I was, I'll trust you. I mean, I was very much a Celesteela merchant, and it didn't work out that season, but yeah, I mean, obviously you know way more than me, so
Right.
in that case, obviously, like I know when to defer to people, but sometimes even players with more experience and like they can cook up some bad ideas.
No, that's true. That's true. I've definitely cooked up bad ideas, and then I will convince myself they're good, and then you're gonna have to like get me out of my bad idea. I
think for different people, it's like, man. For example, you. I know that you're like a competent. Like some people are great players, but they just aren't. They just aren't good drafters.
You should have seen the Wolfie Con Parish I was cooking up on the draft boards the other day. I was remaking Wolfie Con Parish, but for STC.
Man, like I'll say, I've already like talked with some like specific players, and like they've been DMing me and talking about like some of them drafting for players is a huge deal breaker, and like I'm willing to be flexible with that.
Okay. All right. That's most of my main questions right there. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Oh, I mean, you're doing your own interview, right? Or can I ask you questions?
No, I'm not doing my own interview.
But so you're just like throughout these interviews, you're sharing things about you and
pretty much to create conversation is all. You know, you answer a question, I'll give my own personal thought on that kind of thing, like I've been doing with all these.
Actually, I'll ask you, what do you think right now in the pool? Like, what do you think the most expensive player will go? You don't have to say what player. I mean, I think we all know who we're talking about. But like, what do you think the most expensive player is going to end up being in this? But do you think it's going to be like over under 40K?
I think for sure.
In this kind of player pool, it'll be under 40K. I don't see any captain who will be spending 40K on a singular player. Mostly because I think the overall player pool is very strong. So then only teams I would say that would go for 40K on a player are teams that did not buy in one of the captain slots, right? If you had bought in a captain slot, then doing that kind of stuff is a kind of huge opportunity cost, because if you spend too much on your top player, then as a whole, it is making the rest of your roster less weak. For example, I could spend 50K on Miso, and then the rest of my team will be min bids. Now, has that worked? Yes, that has worked. Miso is very strong.
No, that's a PWS winner right there.
Right? It's a very strong, but it doesn't mean that if Miso has a bad season, that doesn't mean the rest of the team can carry,
for
right? Sure. And in those instances where Miso had a milling season, the rest of the team had popped off. Like some of the mid bids had like really, really positive seasons, right? So they got lucky in that sense where the min bids were popping off as well.
I'm not gonna. Miso is like crazy prep support though, like.
So that in that example, it is where I think it just comes down to the player pool kind of thing. Where I think right now at these current apps, I would not see myself as a manager going over 40K on anybody. No specific player I would say in this player pool right now I would value over 40K.
Just because you shouldn't doesn't mean people won't.
Yeah,
no, 100%, 100%.
I think I was going to say as well. Like, I think there's a lot of. I mean, this is a question generally about like guys, like you don't have to answer if it's going to like hit it, but like drafting strategy, scouting strategy, because I think a lot of people, like captains, come from similar groups and value similar players. But like, what's your strategy to like try and get the upper hand on scouting and like maybe find some players that other captains don't know and that you can get for cheap and win out the auction?
I think good players can recognize other good players. I think that's the main big thing, and I think when you're good at the game, you don't have to convince other people you're good. That's the main thing. Bad players will try to convince people more often that they are good players rather than a good player trying to convince other people they're good players because they already know, right? You know what I mean? Just watching people, like, not just one sample size, right? Like, obviously you can post records and all that kind of stuff. That'll be good. But posting, posting like your slogan username and be like, check my replays. And like actually like sitting there and like going through like the replays and all that kind of stuff, you can notice like, oh, this guy's actually playing the game pretty well
for sure
and stuff like that. Or like even like really, like let's say VGC, like you have like live regional VODs, right? Like you can see how they're playing on stream, right? No, not everybody plays the same. Sometimes there's nerves and other stuff like that. Some people are very good players, but they'll get into their own head, kind of thing, right? And it's kind of being able to maybe bring those kind of players down where they're like good and like calming them down before the game and, you know, having them be able to actually perform consistently, right? That's one of the main things I think is important. I also take context into it. I'll use my DFL thing for example. Right, I saw there was a lot of people for summer seasonal getting drafted. I will tell you, every summer seasonal app I threw in the garbage. Anyone who did well in summer seasonal, I didn't even consider it because I don't consider it real. None of them.
No, I agree with that.
There are people
Those
who in there
records
who
are
are
really
like claiming
inflated.
like they beat Zing and all that kind of stuff, like great singles player. I didn't even consider it because I knew what was going on at the time. He's not focused on summer seasonal. He's just pulling up with a game, right? And all that kind of stuff. He's just pulling up with a pace, right? And all that kind of stuff. Like you even see from like Draft Factory, those games are not real. They are not real.
That's why I really like the, at least in here, that you ask for their showdown username, because that's the main way that I scout people through these tours. Is I will look through every single player, even like people I don't know especially, and I'll just look through the replays, see what I think on like a glance of like a few different series or whatever, and then like from there I feel like you can get a decent tell on to most of the skill. Like I even once for PWS, I think I told you about this, that someone sent like a replay code on like Usum or something, and I pulled that up, and it was so funny. Unfortunately, the guy wasn't very good, but if he was, I would have drafted him.
No, 100%. Other things that you do I look out for people's connections. Sometimes I'll try to see who is this person connected to, and other things like that. Are they connected to other players in the pool? Did they app with their friend? Did they app with a certain captain in mind? And other stuff like that I'll look out for, which in general scouting, right? I mean, like the easiest thing to do is you click on somebody and you be like, are they friends with them? Like, I mean, like everybody in this pool, I have like over 500 friends on Discord. You're gonna find like everybody who plays at WBG is friends with me. I just add all the coaches because it makes it easier for me to DM them if I need to DM them about scheduling and shit. Because if someone's not scheduling, I'll go into the DMs and start harassing them.
You're like literally the interconnected web for like for the BGC community. You're like everywhere.
But like in some cases, that can also help you like scout out like which captains want who, right? And stuff like that. It just like generally seeing like who is this player connected to, what is their background and other stuff like that. Sometimes they won't tell you because some players are trying to stay low key. But sometimes if you can find who like this guy is connected to, and maybe you hit up like his friend might tell you, and like other stuff like that. Like that's how I found out about Trace. That's how I found out about Trace. Trace was trying to stay low key to get drafted with Setsuku, and I told Trace, I'll draft both of you. Just stay low key, keep staying low key.
Well, didn't you end up lying because you didn't get to?
I didn't get to. He was too expensive. I ended up lying. But I
agree with that because since I remember at the time, like that's a name that you know, like he's like a name that you know. But Trace, like I didn't know Trace at the time.
Right, nobody knew who Trace was, and like I think Lem's team was banking on that, and it's like because I found out who he was connected to, and I just asked a couple questions. It just worked out. Like.
No, I think for pools like this, like a lot of the draft players are so connected, and like you'll know who they are, like you know who they're friends with, like who they're good. But like it's a lot of the people you don't know that are coming from Smogon or like just potentially like LAN as well. That like these are the people that you need to get a good understanding of to know.
Like fortunately, like I share a mutual server with like USPL and NPA, so I could just click on them and I'll see like, oh, okay, this guy came from NPA, right? I can also see which invite link they clicked. I mean, that's my perk as being server owner. I could click and see like who did they join from. and shit like that.
That's why you won all the seasons. Oh,
that's why I won all the seasons. That's damn right. That's damn right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I've talked too much.
All right. I got a fun question for you. Have you ever intentionally bid on players that you didn't want to make other captains pay a higher price for them?
100%. 1,000,000,000%. Vini can attest to this. PWS, I was upbidding people I didn't even want. I didn't want Pate and I didn't want Bronson. I made people pay $30K for both of them. Miso last season, I think me and Robin were like, if we get Miso for cheap, we want him. Sure. If we're just gonna bid him up to 50K because we know people want Miso.
All right, here's the second part to this question. Has it ever backfired on you?
Oh, let me think. Season 2, no. Season 3, did I have anybody I didn't want on my roster? Yes. It was one of my min bids. I was trying to get somebody to waste budget, but I upbid them and then they just gave up immediately, and I was like, oh, okay.
No, I think I've done that myself as well. Like I'm generally like I think you are much more aggressive in terms of auction strategy. For me, I sit back and I back off a lot, but I think it's also important like early on something that I want to like consider for this auction even is like you can push on players. You just got to make sure that even if you're pushing aggressive, that you're fine if that player pushes back on you. I think later in the auction is when it's very important to not do that because it's so easy to end up with someone towards the back end. So like towards the end of the draft, you generally only want to bid on someone like you want. Because I've had that backfire on me before where I was bidding someone.
I actually had a very pleasant experience with that, where it did backfire, because at that point in time, I didn't really want them, but they ended up being very good. It was Soul Survivor, actually. He ended up being very good for the team. Very good. And we got him for very cheap, because I was just bidding him up at that point, right? And I had gotten him. And I was fine with that, because I got him early in the auction. Very early in the auction, I'd gotten him. And I was like, okay. I was just trying to bid him up, because I knew Dat Boy's team wanted him. Because, he had like a 7-1 season, right? Under season, like a last season, right? Like, surely they want him again. They just gave up on him, like, for no reason. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up with him. I was fine with it, too.
As the auctioneer, I've seen all this stuff. But yeah, as the auctioneer, I've seen all this stuff for the first
right. And like, I was okay with it. Like, I was like, this guy wasn't on the plan. He wasn't on none of my plans. Not a single one. I ended up with him, and I'm like, oh.
No, it's very much a double-edged sword, because you want to try and get people for like as cheap as possible. Like, I realize as well that price isn't everything in these stores. As long as you aren't like crazy overpaying, like it's all subjective, and like if you get what you want, then that's what matters more.
Yeah. No, 100%. I would say that was like the main one. In season 2, I think I had gotten everybody I had wanted. Just straight on that roster was crazy. I don't think I could ever recreate a team as strong as season 2. That team was insane.
Because basically everyone on that roster, I would say, probably besides me, is like worth way more than they were.
I don't know actually how. Like that team would probably cost like triple the budget. Like now that
maybe if I go for min bid, then you can afford the rest of the team. Only one of them.
Vinny would have to be min bid, and even then, Vinny wouldn't be min bid.
No, you literally you could only afford one other person, like adjusted price.
Desksmash went for what, like 25K next season, like actually crazy.
Yeah, and then it's the price jumps. Price jumps are huge, especially now in like other pools as well.
Oh no, 100%.
Like one good season can just jump someone up.
But yeah, the main one I would say, well, there was the min bid on my team. I'm not gonna name names, but I didn't really had wanted them. But this guy ended up just getting them. It was like whatever. And then there was Soul Survivor. Soul Survivor was actually a very pleasant one. Very good player. He was very good to team with. Overall, he was one of those players who I felt like I wasn't active enough for them, but they won their games anyway. That sounds weird when I say that, right? I think it was just like a mistiming kind of thing, because my schedule is pretty busy and such, right? And because of my limited schedule, I wasn't there to support as much as I should have been, but he still won anyway, which was very impressive for me. Because that would be like that player that good player that you missed the potential, but he was strong enough to where even then, like, he was winning his games. So that was a very pleasant surprise.
Always good, yeah.
For sure.
Even as a captain, even if you try to do everything, you just can't. It's just you're gonna miss something. Like there's gonna be a hole somewhere, and that's where like sometimes players have to.
Everybody else on my team, Trace was intentional. I'd wanted Trace from the start. Miniman, I actually wanted. I wasn't sure how much he would be. I was just bidding him up at that point, and I just gotten him, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Who else was on there? Soul Survivor I didn't think I'd get him for that price, because I was just bidding him up, but I was fine with that, because I got him early enough to where it locked into Swish main, and I didn't have to look for another Swish main, right? Because I just knew at that point that me, Soul Survivor, Swish, boom, boom, we're done, right? And then who else? Log Ice and Impulse were also intentional. I had wanted both of them from the start. I know Rao had wanted both of them, so then that was about it, and everybody else was just kind of like filling in holes at that point in time.
No, I generally am also like going into pools. I'm very intentional with who I want. Like for example, my PWS team, I was very intentional. Like I was giving up on a lot of top players in the pool, and my top player ended up being Nala, and it worked out very well.
Yeah, Nala is a weird. I love Nala. I know he knows I'm a big Nala fan. Bro, Nala always makes himself look washed to me. I don't know how he does it. I always think this guy's washed, but he's good.
No, that team also benefited from 9-0 Lucas and Blitz coming in towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know. That min-bid Blitz was dumb.
Well, he was only available after week 6, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Your team had to make it. Your team had to make it there. There was a very good chance you did it. If your VGC
we almost didn't. That team was... Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's about it for me. You guys have any other questions for me?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Will you let me buy you an ice cream at Worlds?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'll buy
W.
you an ice cream. We can trade. Like, I get you one.
I'll try not to. I'll try not to no show you at next Toronto.
Yeah, I was mad as fuck. I went to Toronto to go see you, and then you just no show me. Like,
You
what
went
the
to the
fuck,
regional.
bro?
I was gonna go until I had an exam that day.
Oh my god! Just skip your exam
On a Saturday?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, dude. This guy's making up having exams. I would believe he's a liar.
No,
he didn't
I
say that.
unfortunately. You think? Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
my
would go.
pet catfish died. I broke
Hey,
my ankle.
Yeah.
You
I
might as
ended
well
up
just
getting
said my
someone else
cat
that
got
wasn't
struck
gonna
by
go
lightning.
otherwise
I
to go
took a walk
though.
outside. Like, come on, bro. Like,
Hey, I got someone else to go who wasn't gonna go otherwise. So no, I want to go though. But yeah.
all right, I got a couple lightning round questions.
Ooh.
All right, this is gonna be what do you prefer? Your preferences for drafting overall. Just a couple quick ones. We're gonna do Tailwind, Trick Room, Fake Out, and Follow Me. First, we're gonna start with for Chuck. You could answer for each individual gen if you want, or you could just answer your preferred gen. It doesn't really matter. We can start with Tailwind setters. Do you prefer high tier, mid tier, or low tier?
Ooh.
Want to ask the base assumption? We're just going
definitely
off of
high
SV?
tier in SV. I'm just thinking SV.
I think it depends for SV specifically. It depends a lot on the other pieces that you have on your team. Like, for example, I think Whimsicott is really, really good, but if you don't have good pieces that can abuse Whimsicott, like a strong special attacker that can take advantage of fake tiers, or for example, if you have like a Gouging Fire or a Chi-Yu that can take advantage of Sunny Day, I think that makes it really depends on like what your game plan is in terms of building around that Pokemon in general. If you don't have a specific plan, I think a mid tier would probably be better. Something like a Talonflame or a Murkrow would be pretty good. It really just depends about
We know you
depends
like
on
Murkrow.
the pieces that you put around it. I think Murkrow is like, it's just sort of like you kind of have to have it because if you don't, what else can you get?
Yes, well,
Like
then go for it.
Iron
But like
Jug.
the lowest
It's like Iron
the
Jug.
lowest I'm willing to go is like something like Jugulus. I think like if I'm like actively wanting Tailwind, I'm always going for a high tier. Like you never get low tier Tailwind. It's just so useless because if your team wants Tailwind, you're getting that worst mid tier, which is why like I pref high tier because I really like, for example, Whimsicott is one I value a lot because like I like using Shifu and I think stuff like that really good.
So would you consider a Pokemon like Zapdos a high tier or a mid tier Talon Center? It is in like 15 points currently. Zapdos is in 15
I was
points.
gonna say it's in between though because it's not high tier because it's not one of those like priority tailwinders or like one of the like insanely consistent tailwinders, but it's above mid tier because of what it's able to bring to a team. But it's like Zapdos fits in like a weird spot though because it's a bulky tailwind setter.
Yeah, I think if your team is not like immediately offensive, like if it's more of like a balance oriented team, I think Zapdos is perfectly fine as a Tailwind setter because you just want to match Tailwind. But if you want to go for like a Chi-Yu plus like Glamora angle, then you definitely
That's
don't
like
want
Whimsicott
Zapdos.
always, yeah.
Yeah, you have to have like a Whimsicott or even Talonflame. Talonflame effectively does like the same thing of setting Tailwind in Sunny Day.
All right, I will tell you guys. Speaking of Whimsicott, some of Whimsicott's pieces have actually moved down in the tier list. Two notable ones are Chi-Yu and Golden Go. They have moved down in the tier list.
Interesting. Wait, we're getting buffed with cheap Goldengo. W.
Yeah,
That'd be
some Pokemon notably who moved down. Volbeat, Illumise. Those have all moved down. Iron Jugulus
yeah,
and
I like
Iron
them.
Jugulus has actually moved up, and Murkrow has moved down.
Yo, wait, what are we Jugulus is good though. I can't believe it.
Jugulus is sick. I love Jugulus.
Yeah,
That
you were
guy
using it
carried
last
me
season.
It was
Yeah.
so good.
Those have been a couple of changes right there. So some Tailwind teams will definitely have some more options over there, especially with Chi-Yu and Golden Go being cheaper from the Ben 19 points. Next up would be Trick Room setters. We have high tier, mid tier, or low tier.
Definitely mid to low tier. Any team that like relies on Trick Room week in and week out is just really, it's way too easy to have counterplay for that. Like you can just do Trick Room in prison, or you could just reverse Trick Room, or you can click Taunt or Fake Out. There's a billion ways to shut down hard Trick Room. I think it's much better to have like a mid tier option as like, if you want to go for a Trick Room angle against a certain type of team, I think that's much better. But if you're dedicating like 2 of your slots to Indeedee Hatterene, good luck.
Right.
I'm very much in the same boat. I agree, mid to low tier. Like for me, I'm not a hard Trick Room player. I don't like that, and I don't really think it's very like consistent either. In draft especially, there's so many ways to counterplay it, and almost every team is gonna have one. But like the Hopeless got me on this one. Spiritomb, like I think stuff like that is just, it's so value, and I think like I much would rather, like if I'm getting a Trick Room center and my team isn't Trick Room focused, it's like it's either like a mode where I don't really want that much of an expensive like tank on my team, or I get something to get anti-TR. So that's why I like cheaper options.
I actually prefer. I never really go for mid tier. I usually either go for a very low tier, and I would consider Spirit Tomb a low tier Trickroom setter. By the way,
Yeah, I agree with that.
Or I'll go for high tier Trickroom setters. I think that I prefer to play Tail Room in this kind of instance. You have your very good Tail Room abusers. You have Iron Hands, Ursaluna, and BM. They are very, very good Tail Room abusers. 50 speed is more than enough than most of what you need most of the time, especially because Chin Pow and Flutter will only be on one draft. So nothing else is really hitting those speed tiers. And if it's Ogre Pawns, then you should be able to easily outrun that with your base 50 Pokemon. Even base 40s like Dragalge can outrun them pretty easily. Even then, I think Tail Room is just the objectively correct way to play. You have some really, really good Trick Room setters that can play Tail Room. So one of them that comes to mind is Sinistra. I think some Pokemon who are considered quote-unquote high-tier Trick Room setters are just bad. I think Cresselia is a bad Trick Room setter in draft. I think its best set is Calm Mind. Don't at me. This straight up is just Calm Mind. If you're using it for Trick Room, it's probably a bad draft. Some Pokemon that can work are like P2. I think Oranguru would be considered mid-tier, which is kind of fine. It's more gimmicky, but it can work. Right? And I think in the end, stuff like Sinistra can really, really work well on Tail Room. I think Cookie last season on Overcooked Artillery had a really, really good Tail Room team with Roaring Moon, Urshifu, Blood Moon, and Sinistra. And the Tail Room mode was really strong. Sinistra could play them both, and the Trick Room mode with Sinistra was very, very strong, especially when Tailwind went off. And then the BM was out, then you just set Trick Room with your Sinistra, and then you can clean the game from there.
Stuff like Cresselia and P2 as well don't even have to set Trick Room to be effective. Like, there's big balls of stats that can just take hits and do a good job of supporting its team.
I know you said Lightning, but like I agree with you because like for example stuff like mid-tier Trick Room setters, like I think Slowbro and like those ones are almost like never worth it. And then I think that I do also agree with Tail Room. Like I think not being forced into a mode is just so strong. And prep, you have your opponents have to prep for both.
That's correct. I agree with that. For a bit of spoilers, none of the. Actually, I think Cresselia moved down. I think other than Cresselia, a bunch of Trick Room setters had moved down. None of the high tier ones did, but a bunch of mid tier ones and low tier ones did. I know you mentioned you really Spirit Tomb. Spirit Tomb had moved down. Dusknoir had moved down. Dustbuffs had moved down.
Really?
Slowbros had moved down, and as such. Slow Kings. They should group them.
That's surprising. I'm surprised you moved Spirit Tomb down. I feel like that mon I always see like finding success.
It's more like an angle of correct. It is probably fine for its price. We're gonna move it down to see if more teams will actually draft some Trick Room because a lot of teams have been favoring this HO Tailwind kind of thing. So we're gonna see fair. I think we're gonna see how if we move down some Trick Room setters, how the teams will draft more Trick Room.
I like that.
All right, next will be Fake Out. High tier, mid tier, or low tier? There's only one correct answer
here. I mean, I'm just gonna go there. I don't think that it's not high tier. I think in a meta with Covert Cloak and Terra Ghost, like if the mon isn't if it isn't like a soul like Fake Out mon, then it's fine. But if a lot of the strengths in the mon comes from Fake Out, it's just not worth it to draft in a meta where it's that easily countered. And even if it's not countered, it's a really pain in the ass to prep around. So, like, I think about ones like Pinkaton, stuff like that in the mid-tier that I like because it can do other things that can punish teams around Fake Out.
Yeah, it's less about do you want it because it has Fake Out, or it's more so like it already has a good kit and you can just add Fake Out to it. Like, an example of like a really good low-tier Fake Out is Hisuian Sneasel. It actually has like a pretty decent attack and speed stat. So you get fast Fake Out, and you can also spam coaching with it as well. So it's got a lot of cool utility outside of just a fast Fake Out. Just having a fast Fake Out in an HO meta where people can run Terra Ghost and Covert Cloak is just like an overextension of resources.
I hate
Hitmontop first of all. I think that mon is so ass.
At least it gives Wide Guard.
Which Pokemon?
Hitmontop.
Hitmontop's like it's so bad. I don't like Hitmontop. The replay of Hitmontop clicking Mach Punch on Chen Pao living lives rent free in my head.
Ant, bro.
It's so bad. As for me, me personally, I always go for high tier Fake Out. High tier Fake Out all the way. Your two high tier Fake Out Pokemon are Rillaboom and Iron Hands. They soul carry this just straight up. There is no reason you wouldn't want an Iron Hands or a Rillaboom on your draft, and I think they just soul carry Fake Out in high tier.
I think I'm like I can agree with I mean, Iron Hands, I think a lot of times that's mon is less draft for fake out. Like Rillaboom is probably the most draft for fake out mon, but I think Rillaboom can succeed a lot of the times because you're getting them to Terra into something that doesn't resist
Even
grass,
then-
and then it can just spam grass moves. It can knock off as well on that stuff, and it's
But
like
even
The thing
then,
is that Rillaboom and Iron Hands are both just really good, and they just happen to have fake out. I don't think you draft them exclusively because they have fake out.
I think fake out's a big part of Rilla's kit more than Iron Hands.
one of the things that both of them can do, because they both have access to this move, is because if you see them on the other builder, you will respect fake out. Unless your team is like
100%.
You will respect fake out, right? And they can both pull out, even like you say, you protect the player on fake out. They just pull out SD. Now they're
I was gonna say setup. Yep,
Right.
They can punish
And
it.
Or choice band Woodhammer.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Like, well, you think Willboom's clicking fake out? Nah, he clicked Woodhammer and just murdered you, right? And those instances, I think these Pokemon are very much more worth it. I'm not too big on the mid tier ones. I think Tinkaton's like fine. I think like, stuff like Persian
Tinkaton
Alola
sucks.
is like meh. You know what I mean? Like Persian Alola and stuff. And even then, I think
Right.
Tinkaton like only fits on like certain drafts. As someone who's drafted it last season, it wasn't too big on it.
No, I agree.
It's funny. I think it's really funny that Desksmash mentioned Sneasel Hisu. I said Sneasel Hisu is the Himothy third of the 3-pointers. Like, this guy is infinitely better than every Pokemon around it. That guy has moved up. He's no longer 3 points. He's no longer 3.
It's so good.
It was so good.
I'm gonna
for
say if
its
you're
team.
drafting shit like Persian, it's like it's just never gonna do anything. Like you might as well draft something more.
This is
expensive
funny.
if
I
you're gonna
think
draft
we
the big
actually
one.
swapped. We swapped Persian's price and Sneasel Hisu's price.
How'd I clock that?
It's like, I want a Sneasler. We have Sneasler at home.
I was gonna say Sneasler. I was gonna mention Sneasler, but then I'm like, this mon just gets countered by Covert Cloak and Terra goes to...
Sneasler is another high tier fake out mon, which I actually think is very good. I think Sneasler is just.
I think because it's
unexplored.
not forced into it yet.
I think it's just unexplored right now. I've seen from how I've played with it, and I've seen some other drafts that drafted is very good. I think it's very, very good on Psychic Terrain drafts with like Indeedee Crown.
I knew you were gonna say that because that was your team last season.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, that team, I swear to God, it literally didn't do anything but Psychic Terrain. It drove me crazy.
Hey, that Terra Flying Acrobatics with Unburden goes hard.
Yeah, that team was crazy. Let's see. Anything else I want to mention here for fake out month? A bunch of low tier ones kind of moved around. I think I mentioned Persian had moved down. Actually, Sneasel and Sneasel Hisu both moved up because they were like 4 and 3 respectively. They both moved up to a different tier.
Wait, Sneasel was that cheap?
Blame Robin, etc.
Sneasel should never be that cheap because like I was gonna say, like I feel like Sneasel just infinitely more value than Weavile and like most.
Oh yeah, because Weavile is expensive. But a bunch of like the cheap fake out months had actually moved up, except for Persian who have moved down.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? Oh, and then last is Follow Me. We're gonna do Follow Me and Rage Powder in one because it's basically the same thing. High tier, low tier, mid tier.
It depends a lot on what your team composition looks like. If you're running like a super offensive core where you're just trying to do as much damage as possible, Follow Me is just sort of like you're not doing enough damage. Like if you have like Glamora Chiyu as your opener with Whimsicott, you can't have a redirector in the back. But if you have like something that relies a bit more on setup, or rather maybe not just doesn't rely on setup, but can take advantage of setup, like if you want to run like a Sword Stance Iron Hands or something, then a redirector is like a lot more valuable. I think it really just depends on how the rest of your team looks.
Well, what if
'Cause
you
I
have
think-
like a Fluttermane, right? And then you get Ogerpon Cornerstone. Ogerpon Cornerstone's a redirector.
That's true, but I feel like Ogerpon is like an exception because like no other
Ogerpon
Pokemon
is
is
just
a
so
good
disgusting.
redirector and a good attacker at the same time.
You know,
That's
I think for me it's not high tier, but Ogerpon is just Ogerpon, so it's like you might as well take advantage of that.
Would
but I
you
think like for me,
consider-
like, the
Would you consider
My
Smeargle a
fa-
redirector?
I think my like favorite tier of the redirectors is like the Electabuzz Magmar type area. I think those ones are just really good value, great typing. They provide a lot to a team, and I prefer stuff like that to like. You're not spending 15 or whatever the fuck if Raichu's like still that expensive or like.
Raichu does not have Follow Me in this gen.
Okay, perfect, great ones. That one's dog shit anyways. But yeah, what other mon was I gonna mention? Oh, like for example, stuff like Volcarona I think is also fine because it's like you play the game between like is it gonna Tailwind, is it gonna like maybe set up, is it gonna hit, or is it gonna Rage Powder?
Volcarona is very much a jack of all trades kind of Pokemon.
Yes.
For me, I think Ogerpon's kind of solo, like high tier redirection. Like these guys, because again, Ogerpon's like in a tier of its own. Ogerpon and Volcarona kind of clear everything else, and like you still have Amoonguss. Well, yes, Amoonguss is worse in draft. Amoonguss in itself is a win con Pokemon, and I don't think you can not look at it. I think if you have Amoonguss on your draft, you have an out to every matchup, even bad ones. Even bad ones. Amoonguss is just that good, at least in my opinion.
Well, actually, like, it's kind of crazy. Like, is it like Amoonguss is like such a nuts TR like Amoonguss and TR is like fucking. That guy might be the TR butte.
Amoonguss hard to see teams any Trick Room team. Any Trick Room team.
That's what a huge plus to it.
It's got a really good offensive move pool as well. Like you can click like Life Orb Leaf Storm or something. You can just delete something that they weren't expecting.
The only person who said that ever.
No,
there was a Japanese team back in like Reg F that had like a Life Orb Amoonguss that got like top 30 on the ladder or something.
He mentioned Life Orb Leaf Storm. I would think a Jetpack Leaf Storm would be a bit better in draft. That way you can reposition your Amoonguss back in and out with regen.
I mean, I think it's probably one of the best like Pollen Puff mons because it's so hard to take down, and like I think it's even like tearing it, just letting it sit there and be a fat piece of shit, where you're like having to like taunt it or like click moves like that and do it every turn is so annoying.
Right, it forces a lot of prep.
I think what I was trying to say is that Amoonguss is just a lot more versatile than it looks on paper. Like it doesn't have to be a support piece; it can definitely do other things.
100%.
I think if you put it into that singular role, then it just for like this is comparing to singles. But like if you put a mon like Mew into that role, it's just you're not going to get the most out of it.
Draft players are a little allergic to drafting Amoonguss, from what I've seen. Very very allergic to drafting.
Oh, for sure.
Because I know they'll say, "Oh, Amoonguss is one dimensional; it's bad." No, that's not true. That's just
I'm probably guilty of that myself.
It's just incorrect take. Amoonguss is just very good in general. As for Follow Me and Rage Powder users, a bunch of them have moved down. Significant ones that have moved down. Teal Mask has actually moved down. Cornerstone is now worth more than Teal Mask. Teal Mask Ogrepawn. Who else has moved down? I believe it's the next one is Mousehold. Mousehold has moved down. Clefairy has moved down, and Clefable has moved down. I think Magmortar and Electivire have both moved down from wherever they were at.
That makes sense.
And then a couple of Rage Powder guys in like 2 and 3 were moved down to like 1 point.
Bro, like for the cheap ones, like they're so gimmicky. But like sometimes I feel like, for example, like just Togepi randomly will just like clear a game. But like,
what's Jumpluff at?
Jumpluff is I think like 10 points.
Not bad. But yeah, Mousehold the regional champion. So.
Jumpluff is one of those Pokemon we were looking into moving down. We're not too sure yet because we have moved down a couple of the Sunsetters. Torkoal and Ninetales have both moved down in price. Significantly more, like Ninetales like significantly moved down. So we're not too sure if we want to move down like other Sun pieces and stuff like that as to making this makes Sun a lot stronger overall. So we're not too sure if we want to do that.
I think Jumpluff's speed tier is good enough to where it doesn't need Sun to be good in draft.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Sleep Powder Encore is also very strong for it.
No, Encore's so strong.
It does just get C-teamed by the move taunt, for what it's worth. You just click taunt and then it just doesn't do anything. Right, and that was my last question. Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Well, thank you for like doing the interviews. I think this season of STC is actually set up to be probably the best one yet. I think very strong captains, apps are already looking good, and pumping out content, like...
I can't wait. I can't wait for every next season to be like, wow, STC has fallen off. Every next season it will be like this. You fall off, holy shit. I can't wait.
It was fun.
There's a lot of excitement for this season, a lot more than I actually anticipated. Especially when it came to the captain apps. I didn't expect to get I could on day one, day two. I swear here, I could have closed captain apps and we would have had all these cores. Just like that. Day 1, day 2. Just done. And then we could have just went into player
people
apps.
Jumped on. Like, honestly, I wasn't even like that. Like, I wasn't even like thinking about it. Then I saw it pop. Then I saw Citrus popping up. I'm like the captain, that'd be fun. Like, I chose this over like doing like other like singles tours, and I was like,
One of the benefits of Citrus
like
is there's less burnout. This is kind of like a unique tour in this instance. There's not really other VGC draft tours that are running, and Citrus definitely there's no burnout for it. It takes a long time for it to come back around, and people definitely get very excited, especially when it starts coming back around. Even when it ends, I'm like, man, they're like, when is the next season of Citrus? I can't wait. And it's like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like next.
You
year.
have like a very dedicated player base, which is good.
I think our community is pretty good. It's still growing.
Oh, for sure. But like you have like you'll notice the same people. Like even if they're off busy doing other tours, or like they'll still sign up here and they'll still play here, and it's like.
I'm surprised there's some apps that are definitely very shocking to have this season.
Oh, sure.
All right, that's going to be the third captain interview. I'll see you guys in the other ones. Thanks for watching.